Welcome to Property Power Talks, the exclusive podcast for NB Property Law. I'm your host, Kaylee Swift, and each episode we'll dive into cutting-edge insights on property law, probate, estate planning strategies, and seamless estate administration. Whether you're a property investor, homeowner, industry professional, planning your estate, or wanting to understand how estate administrations work, then our expert discussions will empower you with the knowledge you need to navigate the complexities of property and estate planning law with confidence. Let's unlock the power of property and estate planning law together. Hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Kaylee Swift and I'm one of the directors here at NB Property Law, and then we've got JB Fremy from JBF Solutions, founder here as well. So what we're going to be talking about today is small to medium enterprises in getting them funding readiness, so strengthening your position before you're actually going ahead and seeking finance. So a little bit about myself and NB Property Law. So I'm the director of NB Property Law. So we showcase, expertise across both commercial property and also estate planning law. I work closely with individuals, families, but also business owners to help them navigate their complex property transactions, commercial contracts, and their long-term asset protection strategies with confidence. So I've got extensive experience in estate planning and commercial law. I'm able to advise my clients on things such as wills, testamentary trusts, the asset structuring, and also their succession planning to ensure that their wealth and their business interests are actually protected both now and also into the future. So I've got a combined commercial and property background, which enables me to be able to deliver the integrated strategic advice that helps support my clients' business growth, their risk management, but also their long-term wealth preservation. So what I'm passionate about is commercial estate planning and property law, and I'm always striving to provide my clients with that holistic, practical legal advice to help align with their actual broader financial and business objectives. But above everything else, I do always prioritise delivering my advice to my clients in a clear commercial terms to ensure that they've actually got smooth transactions and outcomes that are actually generally going to support their success, either as individual and in their business capacity. Now I'll hand over to JB if you'd like to introduce yourself as well, JB.
Hi everyone, my name is Jean-Bernard Fremy, but you can call me JB much easier. I'm the founder of JBF Solutions, where I help small and medium business improve their cash flow, secure suitable finance, and strengthen their operation. With more than 20 years experience across finance in small businesses and medium businesses, operation and technology, I take a practical and a commercial approach that goes beyond lending. I understand how business owners work and what they and help them streamline the business process and implement operational efficiency through solutions such as Microsoft 365, Power Automate, as well as Google platform. My experience lies in combining finance broking with operation improvement, enabling SME to build stronger, more suitable businesses.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, JB. So what we're going to run through today are the key topics here. So we'll talk about how lenders assess SMEs beyond just the numbers. I'm going to talk about why cash flow and readiness matters in actual funding decisions. JB will talk about some of the common reasons why finance applications actually fail. I'll be talking about, the legal risks that are linked to structures, guarantees, and also some of the loan terms. I'll talk a little bit about director obligations as well when it comes to taking on business finance, and then JB will speak about the practical steps that you need to actually reduce the risk before actually going to seek funding. So to start off with, we'll talk about getting, legal readiness, supporting funding readiness once you're ready to actually go ahead and take the next step to go ahead and make that finance application. So in terms of your business structure and governance, it's appropriate business structures, the director oversights and making sure that we've got clear ownership arrangements in place to support both the growth of the business, but also reduce the actual risk of the business as well by having these business structures and governance procedures in place. It's important that we've got, as a business owner, documented agreements. So that includes, your customer and supplier agreements or terms and conditions, making sure that if you've got multiple shareholders, that you've got an actual shareholders agreement for our employees, or if we've got contractors, making sure we have, those employment agreements or contract agreements documented and actually signed off on. All of these documents are actually going to provide that certainty for the business and also help to minimize disputes, which, I'm sure the bank sees favorably when looking to provide finance to a business. In terms of the asset then and liability protection, it's important that, as a business, you're protecting your intellectual property. That'll include things such as, trademarks. Do we have those trademarks registered so that no one else can go ahead and take that trademark? That could be things such as, your business name. You could have a slogan that you use that you could trademark, or the actual logo itself of your business. And also then looking to separate, personal and business liabilities will actually help safeguard the business value. So, again, that'll come down to structure as well. Depending on the structure you choose, will help as an individual to protect your liability in that sense as well. Next one is compliance and regulatory obligations. So it's important for businesses that require certain licenses that they're actually maintained. Licenses will come up for renewal, intermittent periods, and we need to make sure that they're actually, renewed so that you've got the correct license in place to be doing the job that you need to undertake. Registrations, so different registrations as well that you'll do, setting up a business, making sure we're going through, ASIC registration and, in the property sense, when we're doing leases and things like that, we want to make sure that they're registered with Titles Office. It's all on title. You'll also, as business owners, have tax obligations and corporate records that need to be, complied with, and, record keeping documents. We often, as you probably know, 7 years is the minimum that you should be keeping those records for. But realistically, you still need that electronic copy. But the originals, 7 years. It's all going to help to, demonstrate that your business has got good governance and operational disciplines in place. And, that goes a long way, when, like I said, you're looking for funding, but, even succession planning if you're looking to unsell that business as well, or maybe look to do a merger or acquisition. The due diligence and preparedness. So making sure that you do have those accurate documents. Like I said, they've all been signed correctly. They've been stored. You've got the originals that you need. Maybe could be held by your lawyers or your accountants, but that they are somewhere and you know where they are. That you've got all your processes and procedures properly documented. So, staff, making sure we've got all their policies and procedures in place. They've signed off on them. They know what they are. All your legal documents are organized and kept in, one place where it's easy to access. It's going to help then as the business to satisfy the lender, when it comes to time for actually applying for that funding. So the legalities then linked to, the different business structures, guarantees, and I'll talk a little bit about loan terms. So your legal structure does have a direct impact on, your funding eligibility and risk exposure, which JB will go through a bit more in detail later. So businesses, they can choose to set up their structures in different ways. Sometimes you'll, have a trust. You might just be a sole trader as just, trading by yourself. Companies, different various structures you could have. But it is important, as I mentioned before, as businesses, that we do have all our proper contracts in place, our policies and procedures all documented, appropriately updated as well, like with our, employee policies and procedures. They'll, there's always changes in laws and things like that, that may mean that certain parts of them will be obsolete or, irrelevant, that we need to update. So it's important that we're actually reviewing those as well, every 12 months to make sure that they're, still compliant and still up to date with what the current laws are. And as I mentioned before, the registrations in terms of different things, registrations with, your ASIC portal, if we change addresses, if we maybe remove a director from the company, if we add a new shareholder, making sure that's all properly been registered as well with ASIC in that regard. So how do we, I guess, if you're looking to start up business or create a new business entity, choose that right business structure then that's going to suit what we're looking to do. It is a big question that we get asked a lot, because it does affect multiple different things. There's liability attached to that, the control, who's got the control of, a company, if we're setting up a company, the tax obligations, there's financial considerations as well to consider, which are all ultimately going to affect borrowing capacity as well. And then the business exposure to the actual business debt that we've got. So I've listed three main structures here. So the first one we've got is the sole trader or partnership. With this option, obviously, comes greater personal liability. It's you personally as essentially the business operating. So, if you go and sign up agreements and things like that, or loans or anything like that, it's you personally that's got to come up with that money. So, any assets that you do own, cars, property, whatever it could be, will be clawed upon, and could see you go as into personal insolvency if it comes down to it. So borrowing's often supported by personal assets, those assets, whatever you've got, cash in the bank as well, as mentioned, property and cars and things. It is simpler to establish, though, and operate a sole trader, which is why a lot of new businesses will just set up as a sole trader. It is important to review that structure, though. As the business grows, a sole trader is not necessarily the best option for the business. We need then look at a better structure from a liability point of view, but also more tax effective, and that could be the company structure or trust, which you'll speak to your accountant in conjunction with your lawyer to help get that all underway. So the company structure, that actually is limited liability protection. So we've got a company, Smith Proprietary Limited. Now, although the director of that company may be John Smith's not going to be personally liable if that company, fails to pay its debts or something like that. It is the company that has that limited liability. So unless John has gone and, signed off on any personal guarantees or anything like that, he's not going to be personal liable for that company debt. So it does provide greater flexibility for growth and also external funding with a business. And it can be a more attractive framework for lenders as the actual business grows itself. Now, the last structure I've got listed here is trust. So there's different types of trust. You can have, family trust, discretionary trust. You might have a testamentary trust included with your will and things like that. With your trust, though, they'll generally provide you with a lot of asset protection and tax planning flexibility. Obviously, they have been recent changes announced with the recent budget, which are in the process of being legislated, which do affect greatly the tax savings, that trust used to bring, but they do still offer that high level of asset protection. Now, they're often used alongside a corporate trustee. So, it might be, Smith Proprietary Limited as trustee for John Smith Proprietary Limited in that situation. So lending for trusts may require the actual trustee and beneficiary review. So lenders will often want to check what financial capability the actual trustee of the trust has, and potentially also the beneficiaries of that trust. Tip with your business structure is make sure that you're actually, like I said, reviewing that business structure regularly to ensure that it supports the growth, asset protection, and also the funding objectives of your business. Like I said, a lot of startups will just start up as a sole trader or partnership, but as that business grows, it is important to then create that right structure, which is often then a company structure or trust, as opposed to staying as a sole trader, which comes with great personal liability. So establishing a company in Australia. So like I said, we've just gone through the structures. It is important to make sure that we are actually choosing the most appropriate structure. So as I said, most SMEs operate through that proprietary limited company once they're, set up for a little while and, they've gone through sole trader, because it does offer that limited shareholder liability and also that separate legal identity as well. So, with the company structure, you might have multiple shareholders within that business that all own, a share of the pie basically, of that business, but they've all got all those shareholders, all the directors, they've all got separate legal identity, through that company. They're not going to be personally liable should the company fail to repay debts or something like that, unless there was personal guarantees given. With the company structure as well, it allows us to actually appoint directors. Again, it doesn't just have to be one. We can have multiple directors appointed for a company. So a private company requires at least one director, though, who will ordinarily reside in Queensland and hold what's called a director identification number, which gets issued through ASIC. Now, as mentioned here, it has to have at least one Australian director, but other directors could be foreign directors if needed. In terms of signing documents for a company, though, if there are multiple directors, so more than two, we do only need, under the Corporations Act in Australia, for two directors to sign any documents. That's important to note. When signing off on loan documents, whatever it is, only ever two directors are needed to sign off on those legal documents. So with a company, you might need your own internal process and procedures in place as to who those directors are or how they go about delegating authority to allow, that other directors can just sign off and not all of them have to basically sign off. There's things like directors' resolutions and things like that go along with company governance that will need to be, established. So in terms of then establish the actual governance documents, so it's important that a company constitution is adopted. So that's done at the outset of creating that company. Doing it through your accountant or your lawyer, they'll often, once their company is created, provide you with that company constitution, which dictates different things that the company, can and can't do in terms of, what happens if, a director passes away, or the control of the company and how the company basically operates. What are the founding rules of it? If there are multiple shareholders in the company, we should definitely also be considering a shareholders agreement to actually define, how the ownership's going to work. What are the voting rights for the shareholders? There could be different share classes as well, and what are the decision-making process? How does that all operate and look like for the business? Very important. We often see, clients come to us and they may not have had a shareholders agreement, and then there's a dispute that arises. It's much harder to try and resolve those disputes without relying on the actual shareholders agreement. So even if we are going into business with family, friends and things, still very important to have that shareholders agreement, so it does clearly document, what are our, obligations as shareholders and how does it all work. As a company director, very important to actually understand what your director's duties are. You do have a high threshold for your obligations, as that, essentially director of the company, and you must act in the company's best interest and exercise, due care and avoid insolvent trading. So there are a full list of, director's duties that you must comply with. It's important that you are adhering to them and are actually aware of them, to avoid any personal liability in that regard for not adhering to them. I mentioned before, maintaining those corporate records. So as I said, 7 years is the minimum that we need to keep original records for, but we should always have, electronic copies of them to refer back with ever needed. We do need to make sure we keep them somewhere, and that might not be on site. Sometimes, as lawyers, we'll archive things so they get sent off site, but we know that we could, recall a box of paperwork if ever needed. All our registers, we want to make sure they're up to date. Like I said, if we're removing a director, adding a director or shareholder, changing, our registered office or anything like that. Resolutions, like I mentioned before, the director's resolutions, we need to make sure that they're all properly documented, signed off on and stored as well, and that our compliance obligations are always up to date, to support the government's and lender due diligence needed as well. So key legal considerations to consider. So asset protection, as I spoke about, making sure we've got asset protection, which, like I said, can be done through, choosing the right structure for our business, having separation of personal and business liability, which again will be done through the business structure that we use, and setting ourselves up, appropriately. Even with, properties that we own or may own in the future, it's important to look at that. Who is going to own the property if we are, personal guarantees for a lot of things. Maybe we put it in a spouse's name, or maybe we look at setting up another structure for that new property that we're going to invest in. What are the security interests as well that we have over our business assets that we own? So, it might be secured by, we might own our business premises, but that might be secured by potentially our personal property or something like that. It's important to be aware of that. Our personal guarantees. So like I said, we might be set up as a company, and liability doesn't necessarily affect us unless we have provided those personal guarantees for different things. That could be, for a lease over the business premises if we don't own the property, could be for, bank finance that we've received, whatever it might be. Also looking at, when we are going to get our finance in place and take out funding, what are actual loan terms, and, what do we have to comply with, doing our due diligence around them. And also what is our ongoing regulatory compliance as well, in that regard. So in terms of the personal guarantees, I've got here that, they can expose directors to personal financial liability if the business cannot meet its repayment obligations. So it is really important to be aware of that when we are entering into those personal guarantees, because it is, will come at a big risk to the individual if the business can't service the loan or pay rent, whatever it is. So our core legal documents that we need to maintain as a business to make sure that we've got sound governance and operational discipline, to help, demonstrate to a lender that we're ready to take on funding. So as I mentioned, the company constitution, we need to have that, know where that is. Our shareholders agreement, if we've got one, needs to be signed off on. Employment contracts, like I said, if we've got contractors, contract agreements. Our customer and supplier agreements, any loan documentations we've got, like we might be getting a loan, but we might already have, another 2 or 3 loans in place already. We need to know, what are the details of those loans, and the IP protection, which I spoke about earlier, and maintaining those corporate records for that period of time, that's 7 years. So a well-structured and legally prepared business, it's going to reduce their risk exposure, which is really important when we're doing business. So why then is legal documentation actually important to the lender? So it's going to demonstrate to the lender that we've actually got strong governance procedures in place, that, we've got clear ownership and who's making decisions within our business. And it's all going to be able to be a document, they'll be able to see that. It's also going to help to reduce your legal and operational risk for the business, and reduce legal and compliance exposure, which is important. It'll help support the due diligence. So, the bank will, see all this and basically just tick, 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 and hopefully make a faster lender assessment process. It should then protect as well the business assets. So, protection of the contracts and the intellectual property as well, by having all that in place. And all of this should hopefully obviously improve the lender confidence. In terms of the direct obligations, so as a company, we need to be satisfied that we can meet our repayment obligations before borrowing. So if we are taking out a loan and we're going to be, as a director, the personal guarantee, we need to be satisfied in ourselves that company is going to be able to repay that loan. Otherwise, it is going to fall back on you as the individual guarantor to repay that. So we need to exercise due care and diligence and be maintaining appropriate financial records. You obviously then want to be monitoring the company's financial positions on an ongoing basis to make sure the company is going to be able to keep servicing that loan, and be mindful of insolvent trading duties, and actually seek advice early if that concern arises, because it will fall back on that director who's provided that personal guarantor. And that doesn't necessarily have to be one director. It could be, 2, 3, multiple directors, depending on what has been agreed with the lender. So failure to meet these obligations can result in serious legal consequences, including personal liability. So it's very important that we're aware of what those obligations are before entering into any personal guarantees. So yeah, demonstrating strong governance and prudent financial oversight can not only help manage that director's risk, which is really important. So with personal guarantees and indemnities, so they are guarantees, they're a commitment by one party that they're going to fulfill the obligations of another party to a third party. So, in the situation of getting funding, a director could act as that personal guarantee to say that they, are satisfied that the company will fulfill their obligation. If they won't, they will come up with the money to pay for the loan to the bank. So usually the business or owner, shareholder or directors are the ones that are providing that personal guarantee to the supplier or the bank. So personal guarantees, they're very common in SME lending and often asked for when it is a company, and it just obviously gives them satisfaction that should the company be unable to pay, they know they're going to get the money out of the directors. So the directors will then become personally liable for any business debt through that guarantee. And the indemnities can also create the broader obligations than just guarantees. So indemnity can go further. That should the guarantor be unable to pay, they'll also be responsible for extra interest, legal costs involved in the bank pursuing the guarantors, etc. So personal assets are obviously going to be at risk if the business defaults and you are a guarantor. So it's really important to be aware of that, which, like I said, if you are going personal guarantor for a lot of loans for a business that you own or for whatever, it is important then to think about where are your own personal assets, because you really don't want to be owning much in your own personal name, because that's at risk as well. And always important to actually seek professional advice before signing off on any of these finance agreements, in the personal guarantees, which a lot of the time now banks will require independent legal advice before they allow a personal guarantee to take place. So in terms of getting yourself and your business ready, for lending, what a bit of a checklist of what is important. So making sure that you're reviewing existing contracts, leases, any commercial agreements you've got in place, understanding what a personal guarantee is, what an indemnity is, what security obligations you may have that the bank may require, maintaining up-to-date company records and government documents, ensuring that we've got a shareholders agreement in place if we've got multiple shareholders and all been signed off on, got our employment contracts, contract agreements, any supplier agreements that we may have, and everything's documented and all current. We want to make sure that we're protecting our key business assets, and that includes the intellectual property of our business and confirming compliance with regulatory, tax and reporting obligations. It's important to make sure that you're addressing any legal risks before the lender due diligence actually begins. So it's not a problem, when it comes to actually applying for finance, you've already taken care of that. And obviously, as I mentioned before, actually obtaining professional legal advice before signing off on the finance documentation so that you understand what your legal position is. So legal readiness, it's just not just about the compliance, it's actually about demonstrating, the governance, managing the risk and actually protecting the business before it goes ahead and actually seeks finance. So thank you for that. And I'll hand over to JB now to take us through a little bit more about what the bank's actually going to look at and require and everything they're going to go through when it comes to SMEs lending.
Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you to everyone at NB Property Law. As Kaylee has just walked you through the legal side of protecting and structuring your business, I want to pick up exactly where she left off, because structure and funding are two sides of the same coin. Let me open with a single number: 2.73 million. That's how many small and medium business there are in Australia today. Together, they turn over more than $500 billion a year. and produce roughly 55% of our non-mining GDP. They are quite literally the engine room of this economy. And yet, week after week, I see profitable operators who cannot get the funding they need, or who gets it on terms that quietly holds them back. So here's my big idea for the next 25 minutes. Funding readiness is an everyday discipline, not a last-minute scramble. This is a capability you build, not a form you fill in. And here's my promise. By the time we hand over to your question, you'll have a practical funding readiness checklist and a clear roadmap for engaging lenders with confidence. For those I haven't met, I'm JB, a finance and mortgage broker, and I work hands-on with Austrian SMEs every day. Think of me as your guide and interpreter of how lenders actually think. We'll cover 4 things: the landscape, how lenders assess risk, your funding options, and the practical readiness steps you can act on. So let's put some numbers around it. As I mentioned, the 2.73 million SME, that's 97% of every business in the country. They employ around 65% of the private sector workforce. 2 in 3 working Australians in the private sector draw their pay from small business and medium business. Now, sorry, just I'm looking at the slide, and this isn't an abstract national story. It's happening right here. Queensland is home to more than 495,000 small business. That's 97.1% of every business in the state. They employ around 1.13 million Queenslander and contribute about $137 billion to the state economy, both forecast to grow against the next year, and the trajectory is up. Queensland is projected to reach 615,000 small businesses by 2032, roughly 24% of growth on 2 days. Here's how the funding actually breaks down. Banks still dominate. They hold around 58% of the SME lending market, and the big 4 still cast the longest shadow. But the ground is shifting. The SME lending grew about 25% year on year in 24, from roughly 122 billion to 154 billion. And a lot of that growth is coming from outside the banks. Equity, by contrast, stays rare, and only about 5% of SME ever use it. Let me give you a picture. A business that I work with, strong operator, good book of work, government contracts in that case, they've been knocked back by their bank and had almost given up, because in their mind, the bank was the only option. When we actually looked, the problem wasn't the business, it was the fit. We placed them with a non-bank while tied up their structure, and 18 months later, they qualified for exactly the bank facility they wanted in the first place, on better term. They didn't have a funding problem, they had an option problem. And that's more common than you think. Facing challenges. So why is that hard? 6 headwinds. And I'll draw out the one that bites hardest. First, the credit access gap. The big 4 approve just 25 to 35% of SME loan under $1 million. Read that the other way. Roughly 2 in 3 applications are turned down. Second, cash flow volatility, sorry. My French accent sometimes gets in the way. 62% of SME name cash flow as their number 1 concern. And large corporates pay their small suppliers on average 23 days beyond terms. You're effectively financing your biggest customer. Third, and this one's quietly cost, low scheme awareness. Over 60% of eligible SME have no idea the government-backed lending scheme even exists. And to that, the decline of relationship banking, rising digital complexity, and borrowing costs. And you start to see why good business gets stuck. But here's the thing. Almost every one of these is a readiness problem in disguise. And readiness is something you can control. How lenders assess the risk. Here's the first thing you to understand. A lender is not really buying your profit. They are buying the probability you'll repay them. And profit is only one input into that. They are weighing four things. One, management capability. Do you understand your own numbers? Do you run regular reports? Or do you only look at the books when something is on fire? Lenders back owner who makes informed decisions, not reactive ones. Two, industry and sector risk. Are you exposed to economic cycles, labor shortage, input cost swings? Strong margin and diversified pipelines are what settle those nerves. Three, customer and suppliers concentration. If one client is 40% of your revenue, you feel successful, a lender sees fragility. They want to see spread. And four, governance and compliance. Timely BAS, tax, and super aren't just legal obligation. To a lender, they are a proxy for discipline. They tell a story about how you run everything else. Now, legal structure and personal guarantee. Structure matter more than most owners realize, as we've seen before. If you're a sole trader or in a partnership, there's no separation. The lender is underwriting you, the individual, and that naturally limits scales. If you trade through a company, there's a theoretical separation, but in practice, a personal director's guarantee is almost always required. And trusts are flexible and useful, but they need clean deeds and a clear cash flow pathway, or lenders get nervous. What lenders must value across all of this is one word: clarity. A defensible, transparent structure that match how the business actually trades. And on guarantees, let me reframe them. The personal guarantee isn't punitive. It's a risk-sharing mechanism. It reflects how tightly an SME is bound to its owner. When you structure your cash flow and your guarantees all line up and tell the same story, the lender concerns drop, better terms opens up. Cash flow matters more than assets. If you take one idea from this whole section, take this one: cash flow matters more than assets. Lenders repay themselves from your cash flow, not from selling your gears. So the primary question is always serviceability. Does the money coming in reliably cover the money going out, including the new repayment? Let me make it concrete. Picture two businesses. The first one has a shed full of equipment, but cash arrives late and is lumpy. The second owner one has very little assets, but runs tight, disciplined cash flow. On paper, the first stronger. To a lender, the second is better credit because it can actually service the debt on time. That's why cash buffers and forward forecast matters so much. They show resilience under stress, and that's why the right facility matters. A revolving line or invoice finance often suits a seasonable business far better than a rigid monthly repayment that fights against its cash cycles. Why funding application fails? Now, the question that frustrates every owner. How does a profitable business get knocked back? Here are the 6 reasons I see again and again. 1, poor financial hygiene. Inconsistent books, late pass, variance no one can explain, and in more recent terms, we have as well late payment for the superannuation. It erodes confidence before you ever made your case. 2, and this is a big one, unmanaged ATO debt. Nothing signal cash flow stress and weak discipline faster. If you fix one thing before you apply, fix this. 3, serviceability stretched too thin. Leaning on heavy add-backs and best case assumption, lender discount optimism. They want 3 different scenarios. 4, concentration risk. 1 customer, 1 contract, 1 key person. 5, documentation gap and an unclear purpose, which force a lender to default to cautions. And 6, a weak narrative. This one is underrated. Without a current story tying the numbers together, a perfectly good business simply looks riskier than it is. The good news, every single one of these is fixable before you ever lodge. Funding source and options. Let's compare the 2 big camps across 5 dimensions. Cost of capital, banks are cheaper with longer term. Non-bank costs more, but move faster. Approved speed, banks are slower and thorough. Non-bank are fast and often automated. Documentation, banks want full financials and forecast. Non-banks are lighter, more cash flow led, risk appetite. Banks are conservative and want proven history. Non-bank will accept a shorter track record. Some of them do even accept 3-month ABN. And a weaker security. And best suited to bank for established SME with strong buffer, non-bank for time sensitive or transitional needs. Now here's a smart play. And it's the whole game. Sequence your funding intelligently. A non-bank facility can bridge you now while you tidy your structure and strengthen your cash flow. And positioning you for cheaper bank funding later on better term. You are not choosing a lender, you're building a capital stack over time. Oops, sorry, just trying to, there we go. So who's here use a fintech lender, invoice finance, or business buy now, pay later product? Anyone in the on the call? Okay, well, I'm sure some of you do, but there's three categories worth knowing. Revenue-based finance, think Capify, Lumi, Mula. Repayment flex with your daily revenue, which is ideal for seasonal business that can't commit to a fixed monthly figure. Invoice financing, Octet, Skipper, Early Trade, you have CBA as well. These unlock up to 90% of an outstanding invoice within 24 to 48 hours. If your cash is trapped in your debtors, this is the release valve. And business to business, buy now, pay later, open day, spender, ornamentum, or procurement and trade payments. The point isn't that these are better or worse than a bank. It's that each one solves a specific problem, and knowing which to fit which job is half the battle. Government support initiative. So we had the SME recovering loan scheme that was finalized in 22 by memory. And But there is as well a state level. New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland all run low interest program, loan up to $250,000 for regional and startups business. Then there's the instant asset write-off was extended to the June 2026 and recently was moved to become permanent. If your turnover is under 10 million, you can immediately deduct eligible asset under $20,000. That's a direct cash flow benefit. And if you Export Finance Australia offers tailored working capital and guarantees. Diversifying your funding isn't just prudent, it's policy supported. The support is here. The awareness usually isn't. Practical readiness. This is the slide to photograph. 8 things a lender wants to see, and think of them as your readiness checklist. Start with the numbers, up-to-date financial statement, and a clear forward-looking cash flow position that shows you can service the debt. Then the story, an articulated funding purpose, why you need it, how you'd use it, how you'll repay it, backed by repayment scenarios stress tested under conservative and downside assumptions. Then you personally, your directors, balance sheet, existing liability and credit position documented, and your collateral position where relevant. So remember, security isn't always essential. And underpinning all of it, compliance, currency, VAS, tax, super up to date, because that's your discipline proxy. Wrap in a professional, coherent presentation that ties purpose, numbers, and structure into the one story. Tick these 8, and you're no longer hoping for a yes, you're engineering one. Here's what you can actually do in the next 90 days to strengthen your position, strengthen your inflow, tighten your debtor flow, sharpen your pricing and margin discipline, and renegotiate contract terms wherever you have leverage. Every day you shave off your debtors is a day of cash flow back in your control. Control your outflow. Rationalize the overhead and discretionary spend. Pay down short-term high-cost debt and build even a modest cash flow buffer, because a buffer signals resilience and sharpen your owner structure. Pay yourself consistently, avoid the irregular drawing that quietly wrecks your serviceability, and stress test your cash flow and the conservative assumption before a lender does it for you. None of this requires new funding. All of it makes you more fundable. 6 recommendation. If you do nothing else, do this. 1, diversify your funding source. Don't lean on bank lending alone. Build a stack from fintech, grant, invoice finance, and equipment leasing. 2, keep strong, real-time financial records. Lenders, read your Xero or MYOB data directly now. Current books mean faster approval and better odds. 3, engage a finance broker. A good broker reach 40+ lender and tell us the structure, and that's worth most exactly when a deal is complex or has already been declined. 4, leverage the government scheme. Check the guarantee scheme, R&Ds, incentives, and state grants before you walk into a commercial lender. 5, plan for the cash flow gaps. Set up facility before they're urgent, because the time to arrange a credit is when you don't yet need it. 6, build banking relationship early. Even in a digital age, a banker who knows you is worth a great deal when a deal gets complicated. Key takeaway. So let me bring it all together. 4 things to carry out of this. 1, risk is assessed holistically. It's rare profit alone, it's cash flow, structure, compliance, and management discipline, weighted together. 2, structure and compliance matters. Align your structure with how you actually trade. Stay current on tax, BAS, and super, and you materially lower how risky you look. 3, this is the heart of it. Funding readiness is ongoing. It is not a task you do the week before you apply. It's a capability that gives you growth, resilience, and options. 4, diversification builds resilience. Australia SME face really headwinds, and a diversified, well-documented approach is what turns a maybe into a yes, which brings me right back to where we started. Funding readiness is an everyday discipline, not a last-minute scramble. Get this right, and the rewards are real. More choice, better terms, and the resilience to back yourself when an opportunity comes, ignore them, and funding stays harder and more expensive than it needs to be. So here's my invitation. If you recognize your own business somewhere in these slides, come back and have a conversation. Or straight after, between KD teams on the legal side and mine, on the funding side, you have the making of genuinely funding readiness business. With that, I'd love to take your question. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, JB. Definitely some good pointers there for businesses that are looking to get some funding put in place, and obviously what they can do, like you said, the 90-day plan, like before actually going ahead and making that finance application, some quick steps that they can take and tips to improve their financial capacity, so the banks are hopefully going to approve them the first time and not get knocked back. We'll open up now for questions. If anyone has any, if you want to take yourself off mute, otherwise feel free to pop them in the chat bar. We'll just give a couple of minutes for any that pop through, and we'll answer them as they come on. First one there, can we receive a copy of the presentation slide? So yeah, definitely what will happen after this presentation is our marketing team will send through a copy of the recording for the session, and also a copy of the link to the actual PowerPoint slides. So you'll have them there to refresh yourself or go back on and ask any questions that you might have once you've read them through and got a few under your belt. Give it another minute or so. There's one there for you.
Yeah, so
JB.
yeah, that was a COVID only there, but the latest figures that you have on the slide is because they were assessing as of 30th of June last year what was the impact and how much they funded small businesses. However, there's you need to keep yourself up to date of all the different available government incentives because they change on a regular basis.
Awesome, thank you. I think I've got one more question coming through. I'll just wait for that. Yeah. Typing, no, it's gone away. Anyway, I'll pop our details up here. So if you do want to have a chat to JB or myself further, our contact details are here, and we'll try and reach out to you as well and can arrange an obligation-free consultation with you if you've got any more further questions about, your business structure, or maybe looking to enter into a new business or start up one, and what you need to do there. And obviously JB can help talk to you about, what are your capabilities in terms of lending and how you get ready for that. Another comment there. If Queensland state government funding is managed by QRIDA, forget it, more stress than worth it. So yeah, obviously government lending is not always the best, which is why, talk to JB and he can go through the other options that are available for you. But appreciate everyone's time and appreciate you, more importantly, coming on to join us. And I think we've got one last question there. I banked with NAB for 15 years, run a profitable business, knocked back 3 times. The reasons are still unclear. Then find out that the sector we own, which is an RTO, labour hire and NDIS, we're now searching for private lending. So that might be a good one for you to get in contact with JB, or if you want to reach out to JB directly and he can help, try and understand, potentially why the reasons that's been the case, but obviously also highlights the value and the importance of having a broker, I think, as well. Often, you deal with the banks, it's not very personable. At least you've got someone that's in your court working for you to make sure you get it across the line, whether that's with one bank, another bank, whoever.
That's correct. I mean, it's quite amazing. You have lots of solutions out there, and they don't necessarily come from a bank. They don't necessarily come from a private lender. There's sometimes the in-betweens, and they are all specialized, targeting a niche on the market, and few of them are only using brokers. So it's really hard for the individual business to find them out. I understand that.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate your time, JB, and everyone else for joining us. And as we said, we'll send through the slides and also the recording to this session so you can refer back to. Otherwise, you've got our contact details, and feel free to reach out with any questions that you don't want to ask in front of everyone, and we'll be happy to answer them. But thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Property Powered Talks. We hope you found today's insights valuable and engaging. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. For more information or to connect with our expert team at MB Property Law, then please visit our website at noborderslawgroup.com.au. We look forward to having you join us next time for more expert advice and actionable strategies to master the world of property law. Until then, stay informed and stay empowered.